Hello and welcome everyone to the live launch book release of Is Christianity a Western Religion and Other Questions International Students Ask. I'm Nazar, I'm from London, and I'm the newest social media coordinator for Friends International. So today we're very excited to launch our new book, and we've just been anticipating the release. And we're so excited with the amount of pre-orders that have been coming in and how many people have just taken an interest in the book. So just to remind you guys right now that the book can still be ordered online on our website at Friends International. So, okay, we're going to get into it now. Please extend grace to me as this is the first time I'm hosting an event on the YouTube channel for Friends International. So we're really excited to speak to the author Peter Teagle today. And Peter's joining me. So if you have any questions about the book or just regarding international students, please pop them in the chat now. And at the end, we will have a Q&A where we can answer your questions. So yeah, I'm just going to invite Peter in.
Hi, everyone. I'm here in Oxford.
Okay. So we're just going to have a quick interview on some of the top 5 questions for the book just right now. So if you can just start by telling us a little bit about yourself. Who is Peter and what does he do?
Okay, so I'm Peter Teagle. I was born and brought up in the UK, but my wife is from Singapore. We met as students in Liverpool many years ago. We've been married for 27 years. We've got 3 university age, approximately, children. And we've worked for Friends International for the last 20 years. And my job is as an event speaker, which means that I get to travel to different university centres, giving talks and answering questions for international student groups.
Okay, amazing. First of all, before we even get any further, I just want to congratulate you on your first book. I think this is just an epic release and it's such a blessing to the body of Christ as well, to be able to have a book that just details some of the most common questions that international students ask. And just having read a few chapters, I just know that it's going to bless so many. So how does it feel to finally launch your first book today?
I'm really both delighted and rather nervous. So delighted in to finally think that it's going to get into the hands of the students who I wrote the book for. And over the last couple of weeks, I've already been able to distribute it to some students to get a little bit of feedback. But I'm really looking forward to hearing how students themselves feel about the book. But also a little nervous because it's now in print. I can't change anything. I can't go back and edit anything. It's all there. And so, you know, I'm no perfectionist, but it's a little bit nerve-wracking.
Amazing, amazing. Yeah, I think one thing about just perfectionism is, you know, we don't really do things to perfectionism, but we just do things to a standard of excellence in the kingdom. So the next question that I wanted to ask you was, why did you choose to write this particular book and not another book?
Yeah, well, it was a conversation I had with a man called Lindsey Brown, who's a very famous, very experienced speaker about Christianity to student groups around Europe. And I was there giving a series of talks for international students, and he often speaks to students in general. And he said, there's nothing that I can give specifically international students. There's loads of things which are written more from a Western perspective for Western students, but there's nothing I can give students from a non-Western background. And he suggested I write it. I had a couple of goes, but nothing quite seemed to work. And then about March last year, I was doing a conference and we really got into the question and answer session with a large group of international students from all over the world. And the question and answer sessions were so much fun. I thought, gosh, yeah, this is actually what I need to do. So I literally just sat down one day and listed the 20 most commonly asked questions that I get asked from international students in events, in small groups, personal conversations over the last 20 or more years.
Okay, amazing. I think it's such an amazing thing where God takes you on a journey and, you know, you've gone through this experience where you've constantly been asked these kind of questions. And just from over the last 20 years that you've worked with international students, you've now been given that kind of go-ahead light bulb moment to now write this into pages of a book. And now I just know that it's going to bless so many. So yeah, this is just amazing. So this is a very obvious question that I've got for you next, but I would like you to answer it. Who is the book aimed at and who is the book for?
Yeah, it's aimed primarily at international students who are, well, any international student. I guess I had in mind specifically, as I've already mentioned, non-Western international students who are curious about Jesus and the Christian faith, whether passingly curious, just kind of, let me just find out a little bit more, or quite seriously curious and actually studying the Bible, perhaps with a friend or in a group. That's who I really want it to be read by. That's who I wrote it for. But I think it'll also be useful for Christian students to grow in their faith, to know some of the answers perhaps, or to see some answers to some of those big questions. And for those of us who work with international students who want to be able to answer people's questions as they come up. But primarily, it's for international students who are inquiring about Christianity.
Amazing. Thank you for clarifying that for us. And last but not least, before we go into the next section, what was the best and worst thing about writing the book, and how long did it take you to write?
Okay, well, I started writing in March last year, and by July I was saying it's almost finished. But then I discovered that when you write a book, almost finished doesn't actually mean almost at all. And it took between July and, well, really actually December to get everything sorted and edited and checked and everything. I think the most fun part and the best part for me was finding an illustrator, Celia Wood, who is the daughter of our colleague, Elspeth and Andy. And I had actually known her before. She was a student in Edinburgh where she studied illustration. And it suddenly dawned on me she was the perfect person. And she was so accommodating. So what actually happened was I drew little sketches, and then she took them and made them so much better. And when we put them together, the whole thing just lifted. And so that was based on a sketch that I did, which she did way better. And again, that one as well. So yeah, the whole book was lifted because of Celia's hard work and flexibility. But the hard part, I think, was perhaps answering the question why there's so many different types of Christianity. Not because that is a difficult question for me, but there's just so much historical complexity, and a lot of it has to do with European history. Now, I studied for Christian ministry in Singapore, in an Asian college for Asian church leaders. So we didn't study any of that. But actually what I wanted to do was, and I found this a problem throughout the book, was it was very difficult to explain the difference between cultural Christianity, where people are Christian in name or by label or by culture, and what it really means to have a living faith in Jesus, because historians don't make that distinction.
Yeah, I think just based on what you just said, the historical complexity of the Christian faith, these are more grand questions that we're just about to kind of get into and just engage some more answers from you surrounding that. And also just a note on the illustration. It's amazing that God just uses the relationships that we already have, and we see someone within our circle, and it's like, great, I can use that person to do this. So yeah, anyway, thank you so much. Now we're quickly going to proceed into a time where we look at some of the international students who have read the book and see what they had to say about it.
It's time for an honest book review. So, when I first got this book, I genuinely did not know what to expect. But as I was going through it, I was like, man, this is such a good read. It's just the whole way that it's been structured. It's so clear, so concise, and informative at the same time. And it was just answering these questions that I didn't even really know that I had, but just made me more curious to find out the answers about. For instance, there was this question whether Christianity is a Western religion. And it's a well-researched chapter, and the author gives you some facts, but what really got me was that he used his own personal experience to show the differences between the Western culture and Christianity, but at the same time he showed the similarities between Christianity and, I guess, you could say an Asian culture like mine. And that was what I really enjoyed reading about. So would highly recommend for you to pick up a copy of this book. No regrets.
Hello, my name is Wendy. I'm from Uganda. As a Christian, I am learning the importance of being ready to give an answer for the hope I profess. Just last term, in a casual conversation with one of my classmates, he was shocked to learn that I was a Christian. He had lots of questions, he had lots of objections. I felt unprepared to answer his questions, I felt unprepared to address his objections. But the beauty about Peter's book is that it contains most of these questions. It addresses most of these objections to the Christian faith. Peter also uses simple everyday illustrations to answer these questions, and his answers are rooted in the person of the Lord Jesus Christ. I highly recommend this book to any Christian student involved in cross-cultural evangelism at universities or wherever the Lord takes you.
So great. I think it's so great to see just what people are saying about the book already. And we were only in the stages of you can pre-order the book, and now the book is available for everyone. They can order it online. And so I'm just anticipating what engagement and the impacts that the book is still going to have on people. So I noticed that Joylyn was speaking about her Eastern culture, her Asian culture, and we all come from different cultural backgrounds, and I think to a certain extent there are certain traditions and cultures that we bring with us when we start following Christ. And so just on that point, I wanted to first ask, why did you name the book Is Christianity a Western Religion?
Yeah, actually, the original title for the book was going to be a pocket full of answers in a world full of questions, which many people liked, but we weren't quite sure that it would say what we wanted it to say. And the suggestion was just to choose one of the titles of the 20 chapters as the title. And actually, I think that was the right call, because when I give a series of talks, that question, is Christianity a Western religion, is often the title of a talk which will get people interested in the series of talks. Because even if that is not the big number one question which an individual may have, it is often in people's minds. Because even if they know that Christianity could be objectively true, if they can't relate to it personally, culturally, then it doesn't really have any effect on them.
Yeah, that's true. So in chapter 6, it is titled, Is it possible to be a Christian and stay faithful to my culture? Just wanted to ask you, how would you advise any international student who's wrestling between the cultural traditions that they have inherited and following Jesus?
Yeah. Well, I often tell people you could divide my life into two parts, the potato eating years and the rice eating years, because I was brought up in a very British, very culturally white British, English, I should say, home and environment. But then after going to university, meeting my wife and so on, I then became part of a Chinese family. And I have to say, it's been a huge privilege for me to be on that journey, not only to discover other cultures, but to also recognize how my faith relates to that. So what I say in the book, and I'll try and say this briefly, is that no matter what culture you are from, we all have to go through a process by which we decide which aspects of our culture would fit with the Bible, with Jesus' teaching, and which don't. And even though I come from a culture which ostensibly seems to be a Christian culture, at least historically speaking, actually I found that my decision to be a Christian at 17 immediately made me an outsider. I came with heavy criticism from my friends, from my classmates, and even some family members didn't really understand, and it was quite hard that was a hard time until kind of things settled down. But I would say that no matter what, for example, my Vietnamese friend, she had less guidance. So when she became a Christian, she didn't know any Vietnamese Christians at all. So it's harder for some than others, but it's a process we all go through.
Yeah.
But I'd say, first of all, speak to someone who is from your culture, if possible, who has been a Christian for some time, and they may be able to just give you some idea and maybe settle some fears you might have of what it would be to follow Jesus and feel that you're kind of somehow not fitting with the culture. But also, I encourage people in the book to not confuse Christianity with the Western packaging that it often comes in. So the Bible doesn't give any guidance at all about how big your church building is, whether it should have a steeple or stained glass windows, or whether you should stand up to sing and sit down to pray. All that stuff is packaging. And for various reasons, often people see Western packaging and they think, oh, that is anything to do with my culture. And that's not true. There are far more Christians outside the West than there are in the West.
No, thank you so much for answering and clarifying that for us. Next, we're just going to have a look at another testimonial from 2 international students. So we'll just roll that in right now.
Hiya, I'm Robert. I'm from Hungary, and I find the book very interesting because the author seems to know so much about Eastern culture through personal experience. I don't know much about Eastern culture, so I get to learn a lot, while at the same time reading about Christianity, which I'm interested in. One thing that strikes me maybe the most about the book is that the answers are not written in a mechanistic way. They are rather personal and genuine. And the stories are actually relatable. For example, in the last question, the author is discussing whether Christianity is compatible with science. And the way he describes his experience is so much like what I've been through. It's something that connects with me, and so I can relate to it very well. So I definitely recommend the book to anyone who's interested in finding out more about Christianity. Maybe you've seen some Christians living out their faith and you're wondering about why, or what is this Christianity about that gives them so much peace and joy. Hope you enjoy.
Hello, my name is Tony Gio. Okay, the next question that I reviewed was, is Christianity compatible with science? Which is a very interesting question, and one that many academics, I'm sure, have, because they've been brought up in a world of science. And it is quite nice to see that the author has a background in science, and at one point had himself contemplated between the 2 realms and seeing them as opposing, and the way he addresses the question by both taking a spiritual and a analytic scientific view on the subject was very enlightening.
Amazing reviews. Talk us through the process of writing the chapter, is Christianity compatible with science and faith? And I want to know, how did you consider all the various perspectives to give a well-rounded answer?
Yeah, I nearly didn't write the chapter at all. Partly because there are lots of books out there, and some I indicate in my appendix, about science and faith. Lots of people who are far more qualified than me have done that, and Professor John Lennox is just one example of that. But I felt that it was really important to put it into the book, not just because that is a common question which students ask, but because I felt that the question behind the question, really, or the issue behind the question, is not simply about scientific evidence. It's actually about the nature of evidence and the nature of how we see the world that we live in. Last year, I was giving a talk and I got a question from a Western student. I think it was something like, but what about the miracles in the Bible? And by the way, that's another chapter in the book. And I said, what about them? And he said, well, they can't be real, can they? And I said, why not? And he then thought, oh, well, and I think it's because as a Western person, you're almost brought up to discount those things as they, not even to consider, not even to read the possibility that those things might happen. But I said, well, if we believe in God and God is all powerful, then by definition, he can do what he wants. And that was sufficient for that particular student. But I think in a Western, particularly kind of postmodern or rather modernist, I should say, view, we tend to think of the world as so divided into the physical and the spiritual realms that a lot of people just discount the spiritual altogether. But people around the world just don't think like that. Their experience is not like that. I've worked in a lab in Singapore where people were talking about evil spirits as a natural part of conversation every day. They weren't being superstitious, they weren't being silly, they were serious people, and this is part of their experience. So I wanted to address the underlying issue that our approach to the evidence is shaped by our worldview bias. That's the culture that we come from and how we view reality.
Yeah, I think it's so amazing that you can speak from, your experience within the field, but also just the experience that is unique to you in Singapore. I've seen that that's quite like referenced throughout the book. Yeah, that is just great. And so next, we're just going to have one last look at another international. No, my bad. This is actually Tamara from Edinburgh. She's part of the Christian Union. We're just going to have a look at her review right now.
Hi, I'm Tamara, and I'm one of the international track leaders for the Christian Union's Events Week in Edinburgh. Peter Teagle's book has been such an incredible blessing to us over here. We've been able to distribute it as a follow-up resource after our Events Week to many international students. The book itself covers many frequently asked questions that we see in international student ministry. It's also great because it covers a wide range of complex topics and it breaks it down using clear, simple English, using really relevant, uncomplicated examples and metaphors. So we'd highly recommend this book, and thank you so much, Peter, for blessing Edinburgh and many students across the world with your writing and with your wisdom. Thank you.
Yeah, it's so great that they're already using the book for their missions week. So how do you think that Christian unions and churches can use this book effectively in their outreach?
Yeah, thanks, Nizar. I think one thing I wanted to say is actually that the way I wrote the book is it's not designed that you have to read it from page 1 all the way through to the end. I know that especially if English is your second, third or fourth language, it may not be something that's fun to do when you've been studying all day. You can dip into the book in any order. I did not put, apart from the first 2 questions, which are important, the rest I didn't put in any particular orders. You can just dip in at any point, read any of the questions in any order. So with that in mind, I really hope that churches and Christian unions will use it as something they can just simply give to a friend or maybe sell on a bookstall or something, but particularly to share with a friend and maybe do this, maybe to open the book and say, look, I've just got this book. It's actually written for international students. And in the contents page, it's got 20 of the most commonly asked questions that international students ask. Which would be your top 3? And hopefully, I find that people like to be listened to. It's important that we should listen to the questions that they have.
Yeah.
So they may go, yeah, none of those. Or they may actually go, yes, this one, this one, and this one. And that can start a conversation. But it's also something that you can just give to people to take away and read at in their own time. Or you can say, let's meet up and let's look at question 4 and 5 together, or something like that. So that's how I hope it will be used. But also, if you're maybe on a team of people running an international student cafe or a Bible study, to look at some of the questions as a team and maybe discuss how you can put those things into conversations with students. I use stories all the time because I find that facts are important, but the imagination is really important too. If people can't imagine what you're talking about, it's very difficult to believe.
Yeah, Amazing. Amazing. We're almost coming to the end of the interview with Peter. So if anyone watching has any questions for Peter, please pop that in the chat right now. I had something I wanted to say. Yeah, I think it's really great that you just highlighted that it is a book that you can dip in and out of, and it's not something that is to necessarily be read in a chronological order, simply because it is a question book. It is a book that answers, the questions that international students ask. And so, yeah, guys, this book is still available to order on the Friends International website. Order it for anyone, that it might bless, anyone who needs more clarity with any of these questions. And, it's just seeking for more truth in these areas. There's so many chapters. Peter delves into what about other religions? What if my parents are against my interest in Christianity? What is the Trinity and how can Jesus be God? Do Christians believe other gods exist? There's so many questions. So this book, you can literally be assured that you're going to be filled with some wisdom and truth in these areas. And Peter, I just want to thank you and just congratulate you for your efforts as well in writing this book. I think it takes such diligence and work ethic and just staying very, rooted in God's presence to be able to put off something like this. So honestly, God bless you for your work. And I can't see any questions rolling in right now. So on that note,
do you have any questions?
do you know what? I think, okay, we've got a question that has actually come up. Rumbi, I hope I've said your name properly. Is this book relevant in other countries for students? Does it cross that cultural barrier in questions that people might have?
Yeah. So the book was written for people from many different cultures, primarily living in Britain, but that doesn't mean that you have to stay in Britain to read it. The idea is that you might, this is the context I'm writing in, but my hope is that people will then bring it home to wherever home is. I've already had some interest in the book in Singapore for people who are curious about the Christian faith there. There would have to be some slight change of examples and so forth. But no, we recognize that the cultures are very different. We can't, and even people within cultures are very different from each other. You can't say that all Japanese people are like this and all British people are like that. You can't do that. But what I've learned over the years through my training and through our experience and my wife's PhD work as well, is that you can pick up strands, that there are certain cultural links which, and it's perhaps important for me to say that actually I address a lot of cultures in a slightly hidden way, which means that in my mind, I'm thinking of this particular culture and that particular culture when I'm answering this question, but I don't name those cultures. Because I don't want to be too prescriptive. I don't want to say, but of course, as Japanese people, you will believe this, won't you? It's too narrow. But by using examples and stories, what I want to do is a bit like going to a buffet, an international buffet, where you can say, no, that one is something that really, I like that, or this is something which really fits with me, rather than saying, here, this is spoon feeding you. So I think it's very relevant to, as I said, I've written mainly for non-Western cultures, but as we also heard from that Hungarian student, very much it's useful for Western students too.
Yeah, amazing. We've got another question that's come in. Does it talk about any denominational differences?
Yeah, that is a good question. I try, in some ways, yes, but I try to not make a big deal about the differences between denominations. There are other places when you can go and you can look at that and everything. But what I really want people to focus on is Jesus. I am probably guilty of slightly oversimplifying the differences between different denominations and types of Christianity. But if we believe in Jesus and that belief in Jesus is rooted in the Bible, that is what I want people to understand. But in the book, I do describe how there are three things that people learn their faith from. They learn their faith through tradition, through the Bible, and through spiritual experience. And different groups will emphasize one or the other. But as somebody, I passionately believe that the Bible is the reliable and objective, and I believe God-given basis on which our beliefs are. Different denominations will emphasize some things over others, but so I've tried to not get too sucked into that, but not ignore it altogether. So
yeah. Amazing. Thanks for answering that for us. And yeah, I think that was a great answer. Like, it's just the simple, pure answer that we just want Jesus, regardless of the denominational differences. That should be every Christian's ultimate aim, just Jesus, and, you know, nothing more, nothing less. The next question we've got in is from Rachel Dexter. What was your experience with internationals in your teenage/uni years?
Yeah, so up to the age of 19, I had almost no experience at all of any other cultures. I think none at all. And but I've always been curious about people. My brother spent a year in South Africa and came back with lots of stories from living there. And but just before going to university, I started to read about other cultures. And then at university, my next door neighbor was a Hindu from Sri Lanka. And he and I became friends. And I went for dinner with him and the other dentistry and medical students. He was a dentistry student. And some of them were also students I knew from other places, including a Christian girl from Singapore, who is now my wife. And together we just had this really fun group, really fun, of international students, British students, and a few guys who were kind of both in a way. And we ran events, we tried each other's food, we dared each other to see how much chili we could eat. It was lots of fun, but it was through talking and having very honest conversations with people from different, not just cultural backgrounds, but also religious backgrounds. You see, when I became a Christian 2 years earlier, the big question is, does God exist or not? Because I was content that if God existed, if I could believe God existed at all, then I was content that Christianity was the answer to that, or to describe God to me, because that's what I saw in my Christian friends. But when I went to university, the question was, am I just a Christian because I was brought up in the West?
Wow.
And that was actually a question which was answered many, many times. And it would, I have to say, one of the wonderful privileges of my life was studying alongside students who were training to be Christian leaders from Pakistan, India, Myanmar, Thailand, Indonesia, Japan, Malaysia, Singapore, and me.
Yeah, I think, yeah, what you just drawed upon was quite strong, because, you know, me, I've just kind of come out of my teenage years, and I think nearly every Christian subconsciously goes through that period where it's like, am I a Christian because of this experience or this event? Like, where was the turning point exactly? So yeah, that was pretty interesting. I think we're just going to take a few more questions, as it's getting pretty late and we don't want to take up too much of everyone's time.
Sure.
So Kim Becker has asked us, are there biblical references or any suggestions for next steps for a Bible study?
Yes, there are biblical references throughout. I try to keep them fairly light, as in I've been serious about them and I've put them in, but I haven't drowned people in the Bible. I've tended to try to use the New Living Translation, so it's just easier to read and just to. But there's a whole chapter on what is the Bible and how to read it. So I answer some questions about assumptions when we come to the Bible. What is the Bible? What is this book? Because people may come from thinking that it's a book of myths, or perhaps they think it's more similar to what people believe about the Quran. So I try to kind of address that, but then also give some pointers as to, if you want to start reading this book, where do you begin? And what happens if you come across a question you can't answer? So the Bible is all the way through the book. Not tons and tons and tons of people can't just are wading through text, but enough to illustrate and direct people to where I'm getting the information from. Just to say on that last point, every time I give a talk to international students, I always use the Bible. I don't want people to think that these are just my ideas from my cultural exploration. They need to know where it's from, and it's from the Bible and from Jesus' teaching.
Amazing, amazing. Yeah, I love that answer. The last question we have is from David Wells. What impact has living outside the UK had on your life and your thinking about your faith?
Hello, David. I assume that's David from Nottingham. Yes, well, lots. And I can't begin to say just how much my life has changed. I have completely changed. I think this is something that I really see as God's gift to not just to me, but my wife and to our children. Our children identify very strongly with their Asian side, even though they've grown up primarily in the West. And it's something that we talk about at home all the time. It's such a privilege to realize that this is a big world, but this is the thing. If God is really God, then he's the God of the whole world, not just the God of this culture or that culture. Going through this process, which has really been a lifetime. I'm 50 now, and I became a Christian when I was 17. I met Lynette when I was 20. It's been a lifetime of exploration and realizing, because also the Bible is so much richer than we think it is, because it wasn't written in England, believe it or not, or Scotland, or Northern Ireland. It was written in a set of ancient Near Eastern Mediterranean cultures. And God has revealed himself in those cultures so that we can then draw out those eternal truths, those things which are always true, and then reapply them into our own culture. And that is a process we do every time we pick up the Bible. So it's great. And I loved writing it, and I'm excited to hear what people think about it when they read it.
For sure. We've got one last question. What will your next book be, Peter?
What will mine what?
Your next book be?
Well, funny you should say that. I've had several people asking about, can we do something about Christmas or Easter? Because quite similarly, there are lots of books written about Christmas and Easter, but they're written from a particular cultural perspective, particularly for people who've grown up with those festivals as part of their culture, but have never really understood the significance of them. Whereas we encounter students who don't have Christmas and Easter particularly as part of their culture. So they'd be interested to know what those things are. But also, I hope that maybe we can take a couple of the chapters of the book and put them in pamphlet form or booklet form. So if people don't want to read the whole thing, or we want to kind of distribute it more widely, we can do that. But that's a conversation for another time.
Wow. Yeah, this has been such a fruitful conversation. It's been such a blessing to just hear you expand on some of these questions and just draw into the book and how everything just occurred and how it played out. And I think no worries. I think that this book here, it is our hope that it will leave such a legacy that not just in this generation, but in the next, that international students, in different schools, they may use it just to refer to as a resource. And thank you for being so well resourced with the book, and for just putting your all into this and using it for doing this for Friends International as well. And just remember, guys, Peter's got the book in his hand. I feel like he wants to say something. Go ahead.
I do, because I was just going to say the last part, the shorter part 2, is how to actually put your trust and faith in Jesus. Whether you're helping somebody else do that or you're doing that yourself, it's a big decision. And lots of people ask me that question so many times because it seems so simple and yet so big. And the last part of the book will help you to do that. I will stop talking now, Nizar. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This is a reminder to everyone that's watching. You can just see from this conversation that this book has so much to give. It's got so much to give you guys. So please, 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 I would highly recommend that you purchase a copy right now at friendsinternational.uk/shop. Guys, it's been a blessing. It's been an honor to speak to you all. It's been an honor to have this conversation and allow Peter to answer your questions in more depth. And you guys can keep up to date with us on our social media channels. We have a Facebook by the name of Friends International. We are on Instagram, which is @FriendsINTL. We're also on LinkedIn and Twitter, so you can also just look for that as well, which you'll probably find on our social channels anyway. But thank you so much, Peter, for joining us. And I just can't wait to hear more testimonials on this book.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah,
Hi there, my name is Aaron and I'm the International Student Ministry Coordinator for the Christian Union at Ulster University.
Hi, I'm Bosie. I'm a staff who serves in London.
I'm Ella Young and I'm an affiliate of Friends International in Birmingham.
Hi, my name is Harmika and together with the beautiful team I work as a staff member in Manchester.
Hello, I'm Jen, an apprentice staff worker in Coventry.
My name is Skylar Ely. I am a REACH trainee in Lancaster, England.
My name is Victoria and I'm an ISM volunteer with iExplore in Belfast.
My name is Wayne and I am an affiliate. Right now I'm in Princeton, the United States.
Words to describe ISM are joyful,
exciting,
challenging,
energizing,
alive,
diverse,
encouraging,
rewarding,
truly fulfilling,
worthwhile.
If I am to say the thing that I'm most thankful for in international student ministry, I would have to say the relationships.
I'm thankful to have made so many friends with so many people from all over the world.
I'm thankful to see international art students from different parts of the world. They are willing to use art to glorify God's name.
And also to have the opportunity to share God's word with them.
Watching some of them being transformed by knowing Jesus.
For me, it shows the richness of God's kingdom and it shows me new aspects of who He is.
I'm most thankful for being able to share warmth with other international students.
To help the local church be a part of a global mission.
Our vision is to see international students.
Transformed.
Transformed by the good news.
Transformed by the good news of Jesus.
So that they fully engage.
So they fully engage.
So that they can fully engage with the mission of the church in the world.
Together, we are
Friends International.